It's on.
It's on.
Hi there, fellow Belgium public servant, fonctionnaire, ambtenaren, or other people who work daily in order to make our public services better.
Welcome to the Public Service Adventure podcast, where we travel through the land of complicated processes, obscure acronyms, and invisible accountability.
I'm Evert.
And I'm Alixe.
And with a good dose of humility and optimism, the Public Service Adventure podcast is our weapon, our magical artifact to elevate the quality of public services in Belgium.
Let's go. Thanks a lot, Dan, first to welcome us in your offices.
You're very welcome.
In the beautiful building of the Department Werk en Sociale Economie at the 17th floor.
Yay.
Correct.
With the amazing view.
The Department of Work and Social Economy. The department itself is about 400 people, which is medium-sized in sense of departments within the Flemish government. But we have a total budget of around 4 billion euro. If you look at the department ourselves, it's around 50 million operating budget, and that's not including the money we subsidize. So I work on the project that's called the Digibanken, which has nothing to do with banks. The idea of more like a data bank where you can get stuff from, I think that's where the name came from. But it was a working title, and then for some reason there was a persbericht.
Oh, I have seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
And she used the word, and then we couldn't change it anymore. So
It was out.
yeah. And it's very confusing for people as well. So
It's always a good sign when the first explanation you give to people is what the project is not.
So the digibanks are mainly local partnerships where people can go to either fixed locations or mobile locations and get help with everything that is digital.
If I want to book my holidays online,
Yeah.
I can ask for help.
General, how do I do this online? Yes, there will be volunteers who are able to help you, or professionals. It's not only volunteers. One of the goals is essential services. The second one is education, workshops, schooling, that kind of stuff. And the third one is hardware.
We wanted to ask you about one main adventure that you had.
Yeah, it's maybe not necessarily one specific adventure, but it's definitely something I've noticed. Digital inclusion as a field is very new. And one of those good practices when something's new is to make your meetings and the things you are trying to do, make them as open as possible, have as much as feedback as possible. So for digital inclusion, there is a specific working group for public servants within the Flemish government. I think it's the only one I know, at least, for a transversal team that has a specific working group. And the way this is structured is that it's usually MediaWes, which is a knowledge center around media literacy. They coordinate this, and you get this very open dialogue between different stakeholders, which I think, we've already said this before, the Flemish government lacks a lot. There is a lot of silos, and I think politics contributes to this stick to your lane principle.
And human nature. Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's easier to follow or to stay or not to deviate.
It's also faster usually. And I'm not advocating for you have to have everybody involved every time, because that doesn't work either. If you're talking about government being a talking club, well, let's not try and recreate that at least. But I think if you do topical meetings and involve as much of the public servants who are involved in this topic on a more transversal level, I think it really works, because then, like we see with the Digibanks, people also come to you when they have a question that is in the same field and you know that will have an impact on the project you're doing.
I'm super intrigued. I find this very fascinating. It's really a topic I love. Organizing, opening up communication, participation. My question is, okay, what do they do? What does it look like when they come together? How do they try to include without it becoming complete chaos?
You need to have a neutral mediator. I think it's the only way to be able to do this. And that's why I think MediaWes in this instance for us works pretty well, because they are an expertise center around the topic, so they have the knowledge to navigate the topic. But in those meetings, they are the neutral party. They are just there to coordinate the exchange between the different agencies. Now, on top of this, I have the luxury that digital inclusion is a team that is very aaibaar, we say in Dutch. There is nobody who's against digital inclusion, which makes it easier to get people involved.
But yeah, it's difficult to be against digital inclusion in a day and age where everything is becoming more and more digital.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when there's 46% of the Belgians are excluded or on the risk of being excluded from services because they're not digitally skilled enough, it's really important. Most civil servants who work around this all already very convinced of the topic and already very engaged in it. So it's usually very fruitful discussions that come out of it.
How do they facilitate it? How do they use it? Do they use special techniques? Or it's just, I have something to say and I put up my hand and I can go?
No, usually there is an agenda beforehand. Yeah. You're able to reach out to the people who mediate and they have the agenda and they keep track of how much time there's left and can we still put another topic on the agenda. For instance, the new social tariff from the federal government, of course, has a big impact on those that are involved in whatever digital inclusion in the local field is.
So what is the new tariff?
It's for the people with a very low income, they can get certain services cheaper for like electricity and water. Now in the new social tariff, it's also included around internet access. And then there's some discussions around, okay, what does this entail for us? What does this entail for the citizens? Do we need to do more about this? Do we need to give feedback to the federal level? That kind of stuff happens a lot.
So typically with something like that, you would then inform the people working at the Digibanken. There is this thing, feel free to explain it to your customers.
It's one of the things that I do quite a lot is, okay, there's this new digitalization project. Let's see how this applies to us. What will be the impact on the Digibank, even if it's not mandated from us. People go there anyway. And then we still need to support those people in the field who do the explaining.
Sorry, I'm just super impressed, actually. So like you say, all right, we can think about policy, but maybe let's look at reality, because the reality needs our support. People who are in this case, even if there's no policy for it, they need to be helped anyway.
And if it's not technically my job or within the scope of Digibanken to answer these kind of questions, they will be asked a question. So let's provide an easy answer. If you don't do that, then every person working at a Digibank has to do the research for themselves.
We provide it, or they have to provide each themselves.
Did you level up? What kind of bonuses do you think the Flemish government got from setting up that group?
Definitely, because when I started, honestly, I didn't know anything about digital inclusion, and having that kind of network where you're just thrown into, there's all the actors you need to get on the level, which makes your learning process so much faster, because if you speak with all those people individually, you'll know already a lot about all the different measures that are in place around digital inclusion. Of course, that still takes time, but I think it goes a lot faster than if you have to find these by yourself. That's one really big advantage.
How did the facilitators or the members manage to create an atmosphere where you can ask your questions, where you have enough psychological safety to not pretend you know all the answers?
They do have every time this short introduction where all the new people are invited to say who they are and explain what they do. And it creates this little soft landing, I think, to start your meeting.
It might be related to what you said before about the people coming together with the same intention. The fact that it's open agenda means that you can bring your own topic if you want, so you know that you will have a platform. So I think just having already that might make it easier for
and I think
to join.
The simple introduction in the beginning makes a big difference. I am part of a working group where there isn't that. And in the beginning, it was really difficult to say, I don't actually understand what you're talking about, because they're using acronyms from other people's projects and so on in other organizations. And I didn't know when it was a stupid question that I should know about and where it was really some obscure acronyms that I could ask about. So.
I think that's an interesting question, because some of these topics are quite technical or are very in governmental speak. Lots of acronyms is definitely something in the Flemish government as well. There's just people are via chat already asking questions and other people are answering while some people are speaking. That's a very open way of doing this, because usually these meetings are all digital. I think most of them have one physical meeting each year as well, because you do want to get this kind of network to come together physically.
True.
Absolutely.
So You talked about open communication, collaboration. about having this neutral party helping to facilitate? Are there still monsters lurking? Because it's all rainbows and unicorns there.
There's always one big monster lurking when you're working in the government, I think.
Elections.
I was just going to say politics, but sure, elections. I mean, we can have a very operational, good working group, but not everything that is going on there will be picked up by politics. And that's sometimes is the struggle. We can think about measures that should be taken, but that doesn't mean they will be taken. And that's very much a question we sometimes have in this group, because we evaluate, for instance, federal policies. It's a Flemish government group. Well, how much impact do we have on federal policies? Not that much. Sometimes we're just a sounding board, so it works. I have not yet a single politician yet who is against digital inclusion either. So probably high chance of it being picked up. But yeah, the discussion still has to take place. And let's be honest, if we want to continue the projects, it's not going to be cheap. We are making the calculations now. What will it cost when we want to continue this? Currently, in the contributions we've provided for the local access points, we just said, let's for now just focus on doing an experimentation, because we don't know enough information yet.
Because they also work a lot with volunteers, right? So you need some employees there, but you can also do a lot with volunteers.
It depends on partnership to partnership. That's one of the things I'm very happy with, that we, or at least my colleagues did, because it was before I was here. They chose to leave those partnerships very open. They really said, okay, we're just going to give context and all the rest is up to you. Just 3 goals, and that leaves them up to look at their own local context, their own local municipalities. How do people navigate this? And then apply that to their service as well.
That's very, I think it's great, but I think it's very counterintuitive when you work in government to leave that much freedom. Let's just take the money.
You're shocked about an empirical approach? Like,
yes.
Hey, let's see what works for you and evaluate it, and then see
with
if you
your
continue.
Specific context,
Wow.
yes, that is...
It's not just take the money. They do still have to have a plan beforehand. So it's not just... Here's the money and go. No, they do have to make an application, have a plan wherein they say, okay, we have looked at our own local numbers. This is the kind of target groups. These are the kind of people that are disadvantaged. And then these and these organizations are already doing digital inclusion work in our local context. Let's take those together, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I heard a magical item going up. It was, let's do an experiment.
Yes. And how much did you change the program based on what you got out of the experiment? What kind of feedback you got from people working on the field?
Well, that's still ongoing. We don't really, and the problem is the rules are for the current project is set, so we are not really able to change them en cours de route. We need to see what comes out the evaluation study.
I would like to ask one more question about you. So how long have you been a public servant?
Just over 2 years now, so it's not that long yet.
So where do you find or keep your motivation?
Good question. Yeah, for me, and I think it's for most of my colleagues as well, is seeing the impact of your work. And I have the luxury of being on a topic that is very visible, that is very physical as well. All those locations where people can go, which weren't there 2 years ago.
So that's definitely a good motivation on the long term, but I'm sure there's some days where you have some frustrations. So do you have any routine or something that you do that will pump yourself up?
Kind of depends on the situation, but having a few colleagues where you can talk to about these things, that definitely works. We need to make sure it doesn't go too far into venting and just being complaining all the time, because then you create a very negative working space, and that's something I really don't want. And sometimes I think we verge on the edge. And depending on the day or the situation, taking a break from it, doing something else, go for a walk, go for a run.
Use the body, empty the head, go back, fresh eyes.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we have, very flexible working hours, so I can do that during the day if I want to, and I have nothing planned. I can take a walk.
Yeah. That is definitely not the case in every team or in every department, so it's good to have.
The moonshot question. We have a big dream for the Belgian public service, for it to be so good that the people become truly happy to pay their taxes. So for you, what would it take for it to happen?
I think in general, government needs to open their doors more, do more participation, involve the stakeholders more, and I see this slowly changing. But I think that's definitely something we need to do more, because then also you get a more supported policy making.
Yeah, and I mean, even if the politics decide on the policy, the way it's implemented actually sometimes matter more than the decision.
Definitely. Yeah, and again, having places where people can go and interact with the government makes it a human interaction, which is also a very big difference than when it's all digital, which makes it impersonal, and then people feel not personally involved in what the government does. But I do think there's like this balance. Sometimes as a politician, you need to take measures that are unpopular. I think that also needs to happen from time to time. And I think Brussels is a good example. They should explain a little bit more, at least do participation trajectories and to talk about this at least, why you're implementing this. And that's one of the issues, I think, because it's always the politicians who will do the explaining, but they're not actually doing the work. And there's very much this discrepancy between implementing something and then trying to score points because you're implementing it.
Yeah.
Not to put, again, the politicians in the...
No, but I get a little flashback to our talk with Quentin when he was trying, okay, we changed our organization and now we want to communicate how we do it. We invite people to come ask questions. We have multiple ways of involving people in getting interaction about this new stuff that we are imposing. But we're opening the discussion. We know it's imposed because we've decided with a little group, but you're invited to get aligned, give feedback, and that creates completely different atmosphere than saying just here it is and voilà, do it now.
Exactly. And also one of the things that should change is the perception. You always hear, isn't government very boring? Isn't it very strict and hierarchical? And I'm like, it's kind of hierarchical, but I mean, if I want to speak to our Secretary General, I can do that. It's not like there's this, you cannot do that kind of thing. Not at all. So this boring and this top-down idea people have of government, I can only speak for our own department, of course, we don't really have that culture at all. So I'm always trying to fight this preconceived notion of, no, that's not how we work.
That concludes this episode of the Public Service Adventure podcast. We hope it gave you some insights on the inner workings of another public administration, inspiration to try something out tomorrow, and at the very least that you had a pleasant 20 minutes with us.
If you believe our public services can and should be better, please share this podcast around.
And we would love to have your feedback. You can find us on LinkedIn and on publicserviceadventure.be. Bye!
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Great story. Thank you, Dan.
And thank you for your work. We should thank every guest
for your service. For your service.
Yes.
To this country and our citizens.
You're very welcome.